I think the people of Arizona have a right to pass their laws under the 10th Amendment. I think that it's clearly a result of the federal government's failure to secure our border and to enforce our laws.
Americans are right to be frustrated, including folks along border states. But the answer isn't to undermine fundamental principles that define us as a nation.
We're back here at the University of San Diego with Rosario Dawson and Sheriff Adrian Garcia, and we're also joined now by Mike Cutler, a longtime immigration enforcement agent who now works with the Center for Immigration Studies in Washington. We're going to go to our first email question. It's from Daniel Rojo, and Mike, you get this first email question, okay?
Sounds fair.
It's, what do we do with the illegals that are here now? Maybe ask it a few times if you don't get an answer. So,
well, there is an
answer.
answer. And look, you're right. We're not going to lock up, and I think there's more than 12 million.
How many do you think?
Maybe 30 or more. Look, in
30, you could be double.
Maybe so. Maybe even, in 1986, we were told that there were 1 million illegals that would be given lawful status with the amnesty back then. We wound up with 4 million. If we're talking 11 or 12, God knows, we don't know. This is like trying to figure out the weight of a black hole. You can only do it by inference in terms of the impact on our society. But the problem is that immigration laws are designed to keep people out of the country whose presence is harmful. It's the way a homeowner looks through a peephole to make certain that he lets a stranger into the home that he trusts. And while we can't arrest all the illegal aliens who are present here, we can create an environment that is not conducive or encouraging. In fact, there's a section of law that says it's a felony to induce, encourage, aid, or abet. So what you do is, if you can't get a driver's license, if you can't get a job, if you can't open a bank account, then why would you remain? If you would sit in a restaurant and the owner came out and said, the power was off on the refrigerator, our food is spoiled, we can't serve you anything, you wouldn't stay in the restaurant very long. I think we need to create an environment that encourages lawful immigration. We certainly need it. I'm the son of an immigrant. My mother came from Poland ahead of the Holocaust. But the idea of having people come across the border, we don't know if they're simply looking to work. And if you look at the immigration laws, the laws of exclusion give categories, and among them are people who are violent felons, people involved with terrorism, people involved in human trafficking, human rights violations, war criminals. We don't know if the guy that runs the border is simply looking to get a job because he's desperate or he's on the run.
Your answer to the question of what do you do with the 12 or more million that are here now illegally is you do nothing except try to get them to leave through these environmental
and you do arrest
elements.
some. I mean, you don't get all the speeders that are speeding down the highway. In New York, we had a problem with drunk drivers. You started seizing cars. We didn't seize all the cars.
Sheriff Garcia, how does that sound to you?
Well, obviously, you have to make sure that you are providing public safety, that you are making sure that people understand that when you commit a crime that there's consequences to it. That's the way we're doing it in Harris County. We're just not taking it to the extreme of the way other places do in terms of just trying to figure out who's walking down the street and what their status is. But rather, we're basing it on the fact that when someone commits a crime, we're checking them and we're cooperating with ICE, and we're having that kind of process. But also, public safety needs to have good information. He needs to have a relationship and confidence of the community. Otherwise, it won't work.
Maria Teresa, what Mike's talking about, it sounds to me, is making things making life even more difficult than what the Arizona law is contemplating. What do you think the behavioral reaction would be with illegal?
With undocumented workers, I think the picture that Mr. Cutler is providing actually would devastate the United States economy, period. Because what we're talking about is individuals that are working in agriculture, in our health care. They're also working in our manufacturing. So to wipe them out doesn't really seem to be an option. But I do have a question for you. So you've been working with the INS for the last 30 years, and you've seen what works and what doesn't. What would you change of our laws today if you could start all over? If the president and Congress came up to you and said, you have, Michael Cutler, with your experience of 30 years, how would you change our immigration laws today?
Well, actually, in some ways, Congress has done that. I've done about 15
But I'm asking, how would you do it?
Well, you need more manpower. First of all, if you think we're enforcing the immigration laws, we're not. We have about 3,000 ICE agents, Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents for the interior, dedicated to enforcing immigration law. New York has 35,000 police officers. The likelihood that an illegal alien will be able to get away with running our border or overstaying a visa or violating the terms of their admission is quite high. So what we really need to do is increase the likelihood that if you're here illegally, and by the way, you know, we let in 1.1 million lawful immigrants last year. They are on the pathway to U.S. citizenship. That's more than any other country on the planet.
So how would we fill the current jobs that undocumented people are doing if there's no Bracero program that his father was able to enjoy?
Well, let me tell you the problem to that. Mm-hmm. Number one, foreign workers have as a goal sending money out of the economy. Every year we lose between $100 to $200 billion that gets sent home by the people that work here. But here's the other problem.
But that means that their family is less likely to move here because they're actually having
Not at all. They still want to come here. And in fact, if you legalize them, the family would come here. But the unscrupulous employers, now this is the thing no one ever talks about. Mm-hmm. The unscrupulous employer, as soon as that guy is legalized, and I saw it firsthand as an agent, will go to his boss with that magic card and say, I'll keep working for you, but not for $6 an hour. I want prevailing wage. And these are the list of other conditions that I'm entitled to because I'm legal. They were fired, and the next batch of illegals were hired, which is how we got here. What do we do with 20 million people who wind up losing their jobs? They will have brought their families here because comprehensive reform would allow it, and we wouldn't even know who they are. They would take any name they want. And meanwhile, you have wives and children here, the breadwinner out of work. They would wind up on welfare, unemployment. We have communities going bankrupt today. How do you pay for all this?
So would
Just a second. Rosario, what we're hearing from Mike is the strict enforcement school, and it seems to me it sounds a little bit like Arizona on steroids. Make it.
No, but that is
but
the law,
what I want to get is how do you think the population that's here, the illegal population, undocumented population that is here already, how do you think that they would react to the kinds of things Mike's talking about? Do you think we would see this mass migration back across the southern border of tens of millions of people because they can't get a checking account?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the reality is that we're talking about people born on one side of an imaginary line or another. People go where their livelihood can be the best. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about millions and millions and millions of individuals who all decided to risk their lives and try to be an entrepreneur here in some way, shape, or form, work here, just to work. And that's where it gets really dangerous because it'd be so easy to just go, well, all of you are illegal and you need to leave. Now, how do we do that? How do we do that and still stay humane? As SB 1070 is a law that makes us have to go around and point at people. Are you a criminal? No. Are you a criminal? How about you? It would be so much easier if people would just be honest in that way. But again, it is about the employers. It is about people who are encouraging people to come here just as much as the bad policies in their own countries that are affecting their livelihoods are driving them out. So as long as we're going to continue to encourage people to come here, as the same way that these same employers are also sending American jobs overseas, like this is a tremendous problem why we're here where we are. These employers are looking for cheap labor, and us Americans like to have things as cheap as possible. So if we try to combine the two is going to be really problematic. Either that means all of our costs are going to go up, and we're also going to lose all the tax money and that we're getting from all of the undocumented people who are here. Or, you know, we get rid of all these people and we're just here and we keep them all here and we try to figure it all out. But, you know, what's going to happen with all the situation?
Go ahead.
No, and I think part of what, you know, Rosario, I think what you're saying is that we don't have a system now so that we can actually get the unskilled worker that we desperately need right now. So how do we actually create that pathway? Right?
We have a comment over there on microphone 1. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Craig Barkas. I'm a professor here at the University of San Diego. And this program began by people talking about bringing humanity to the debate. And I arrived here in San Diego from the Midwest, from Ohio in 1978. And I will tell you what my experience with people coming across the border has been. I will concede that there are issues of crime and people crossing the border illegally. But when I look around in San Diego, I see people who come from south of the border that are working very hard at difficult jobs that pay very little money. And it seems very difficult to bring humanity to the conversation when these people are demonized so readily. And how are we going to have true immigration reform when we in fact do demonize these people?
Rosario, what is the feeling in the Latino community about this point, the demonization? We saw a TV commercial run in the campaign in Nevada that was demonizing, showing images of these people running across the border. What is it like in that community when this kind of imagery is out there?
Well, I think that people who are especially running for election seem to forget that people can watch. If they're speaking in Spanish, then they're watching the Spanish, but they're also watching the English ads, and they're quite polarizing. You know, there's ads going out there saying don't vote at all. When Sheriff Arpaio had put out an email, which he says that he wasn't actually attached to, but in Arizona, that email went out to 800,000 people to tell them that we had to stop them illegals from voting, and we had to make sure that they couldn't go to the polls. Everyone knows undocumented people can't vote, so what that just meant is voter intimidation. So I think what people are starting to see, and you're seeing it here with the backlash against Meg Whitman here in California, that people are paying attention to these issues. Now, Latinos are going to vote however they're going to vote. They're not a monolithic voting bloc. They're going to do whatever. But they are paying attention to these ads. They are seeing how they're being talked about, and especially people who have been here for generations and going, so if I'm here, I was here before the imaginary line crossed me and said that in American history here in Arizona. But you're telling me that just by looking at me, you can tell me I don't belong. People are going to get really upset, and that's why this conversation is going to get more and more convoluted as emotions get in the way of being able to get through and sift through the facts and get to a clearer resolution.
It could not be more ironic that we're having this conversation in a spot that used to be Mexico.
Yes.
That we're going to break. We're going to break. When we come back, we're going to get to politics. We're going to get to the Latino vote. We're going to get to more email questions. The Latino vote is changing American politics. We're going to talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. I'd like to read you something that I hope sounds familiar. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. That is the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. And it says very clearly that anyone born in this country is a citizen. But apparently that clear language isn't clear enough for some people, and when we come back, we'll talk about a growing political effort in state houses and in Congress not to amend the Constitution, but to reinterpret the 14th Amendment to exclude children of illegal immigrants. That's when we come back live to our immigration town hall here at the University of San Diego. Back in a moment.
I don't know how anyone of Hispanic heritage could be a Republican, okay? Do I need to say more?
I think every speech should begin with a shot of tequila.
Welcome back to the University of San Diego. We're going to turn to the politics of immigration. Latinos are a huge factor in our elections, and so is the fear of illegal immigration. How that played out in the midterm elections and how it will play in 2012 is the question now. We're joined by Celinda Lake, a veteran pollster and campaign strategist for Democratic candidates, and Alfonso Aguilar, executive director of the Latino Partnership for Conservative Principles, and someone who covers the Latino political story every day, Jose Diaz-Balart, from our sister network, Telemundo. Celinda, we saw the Latino vote be decisive in a very important election. Right. The majority leader of the United States Senate, Harry Reid in Nevada. What else did we learn about the Latino vote in our last election, and what does it tell us going forward?
Well, we saw three things. We saw that it was decisive in maintaining the Democrats in the Senate, and I think could easily be decisive in maintaining a Democratic president in 2012. We saw that even if Latino voters initially were less engaged, they turned out in record numbers, and it wasn't about identity politics, it was about issue politics. It was for candidates who spoke to the immigration issue. And we also saw that the immigration issue as a wedge didn't work very well. Only 8% of the voters overall said immigration was a wedge issue for them. They did vote Republican. But the voters on election eve overwhelmingly, 2/3 support comprehensive immigration reform. They refuse to allow this to be a wedge issue.
Alfonso Aguilar, Harry Reid has said he can't understand why any Latino would ever vote Republican. What is it that he cannot understand?
Well, I think as a Latino, I find that comment very insulting, very condescending. I think Latinos are very independent. Yes, the majority voted for Democrats, but we've seen a modest but important increase in Latino voter support for Republicans. Remember George W. Bush in 2004 got about 44% of the Latino vote. So Latinos can consider Republican candidates if the Republican candidates open themselves to the Latino community and propose solutions to immigration that are constructive. But to generalize and typecast Latinos and say they're all Democrats, I think it's pretty ridiculous and pretty insulting.
It's also pretty ridiculous and insulting to insult the Hispanic community like Sharon Angle did in Nevada, and we've seen it in some other places. You'll agree with that. And I think that you, as a conservative, would probably say that you could not support someone like that either.
Well, I agree 100%. We have to understand that the Republican Party also is not a monolithic party. The majority of Republicans are actually pro-immigration. Let's not forget that the last immigration reform we had in this country was under Ronald Reagan. George W. Bush worked very hard to get immigration reform in 2007, and we were almost there. But I think that Republicans, the majority of Republicans, sadly, are remaining silent. It is time now for those Republicans who are for immigration to stand up and say we have to do something constructive that goes beyond just enforcement-only options. And frankly, those people like Sharon Angle and others, Tom Tancredo, have actually hijacked the discussion of immigration within Republican ranks. And I think Republicans have to stand up and say, we're the party of the free market, we're the party of freedom of opportunity. Tom Tancredo, you don't speak for us. We're going to do something constructive on immigration.
Maria Teresa, it seems that hijacking has been successful. It seems a long time since we heard a Republican candidate talk about immigration reform. They used to. George W. Bush did. John McCain did. But John McCain has completely reversed himself. Things have changed in the Republican Party on this subject.
Significantly. I mean, even Marco Rubio had to soften his stance on immigration in order to be elected statewide in Florida. But a quick question for you. So what you're saying, and I think what the audience can agree, is that the Republicans right now are talking on two sides of their mouth. They're talking definitely about issues that a lot of Latinos would care about when it comes to small businesses, also family values, but it is being hijacked by this larger, the larger Angles and Brewers. How would you advise the next presidential candidates, will it be Sarah Palin or Huckabee, how would you advise them to tackle this issue?
Well, I think you'll be very surprised with some of the potential presidential candidates, including Sarah Palin, on this issue. We still don't know what she thinks on broader immigration reform. I'd say that you have to propose something constructive that is more than just enforcement only, that we have to go back to our free market principles and recognize that we are the party of the free market. The problem, as you very well outlined at the beginning of the show, is that this economy has an incredible demand for foreign workers. So we need a mechanism to bring those workers in. Why don't we have a guest worker program that George Bush supported? But that's where many Democrats who are controlled by the unions oppose a guest worker program.
All right, we're going to hold it there. When we come back, we have questions from the audience ready to go. We're going to be looking forward to what's going to happen in 2012. Will Latinos be the determining factor in the presidential election? We'll be back. And we're back with our Immigration Town Hall here at the University of San Diego. Questions and comments from the audience. Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Dylan Hayden, and I'm a sophomore here. And I was wondering if you could address kind of the duality that exists right on the border fence. On one hand, it kind of seems to be a kind of daunting thing for individuals that live on the other side of the border. And on the other hand, we're hearing that millions of people are crossing the border annually. So maybe if you could talk about that and talk about why or why not you think it's successful.
All right, we're going to pick that up as we move along. Go ahead, one more.
Also with that, when will, our Republican leaders kind of across the nation, and we heard the sheriff from Texas and now the new governor-elect from New Mexico, with continued enforcement and really lack of understanding or suggestions in fixing the problem. We seem to be really aware about our border, for example, Border Patrol tripling since 2001 in agents. We've stripped driver's licenses. We've tried to take the right of undocumented immigrants immigrants from renting, and kind of resulting to now driving without driver's licenses or insurance, or renting under horrible conditions. But none of them really seem to know about how we're going to fix the problem. Governor-elect for New Mexico, Republican, ran on the platform of fear and really enforcing immigration laws, but had no knowledge of the DREAM Act, which is one of the most prominent, legislations that is actually, going to be in the lame duck session, hopefully this upcoming week. So,
Alfonso, that is the impression that voters are getting from Republicans. Let's go over here.
Good evening. My name is Cynthia Carrasco. I'm a daughter of immigrants and a young lawyer. Today, the California State Supreme Court upheld AB 540, which really waives tuition requirements for students. What will we do as a nation if we don't encourage access to education and opportunity? Because had that not been the case for me, I wouldn't be here today standing before you as a lawyer.
Just to clarify for the national audience what that is, in California there is in the California system, university system, if you are a resident of the state, you pay a certain tuition level. If you're a resident of Montana or some other state, you pay a higher tuition level, and what the California